Good morning. My name is David Plazas. I'm the Opinion and Engagement Director for the USA Today Network Tennessee and the Tennessean. This is a broadcast related to the Civility Tennessee campaign that the Tennessee has been doing since January. And today we're going to talk about civility and schools. Schools are about to start in a few weeks for students across Middle Tennessee. And while students are learning their arithmetic and their reading and other important subjects, the question is, can they learn how to be respectful toward each other, and who's responsible for that? I've been really impressed with the efforts by one person, Amanda Smithfield, I've gotten to know over the last year, who has Project Civ America. She's the founder and is the librarian at Hume-Fogg Magnet High School. She's been hosting a series of monthly talks with students over pizza, requires them to read articles before they come in to be prepared and have a discussion. I just had a chance to witness a freshman orientation discussion just last week, and I'm really excited to have you here. So Amanda's a very active member of the Civility Tennessee Facebook page. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, David. I'm excited about sharing my passion, really, which is not just for conversation and bringing people together, but also for really renewing that whole idea of what it means to be an American citizen and how it's not just a spectator sport, that we need to be, in the trenches, really being involved. And one of those ways to really be involved is not shying away from difficult conversations. So I try to do that in my own life, and I hope that I'm a model for my students, that they are, better able to do that by setting some kind of ground rules and really being very mindful about bringing them together and teaching them how to do that.
Now, was there an aha moment for you when you decided you needed to do this, you needed to have Projects of America?
Yeah, so there actually was. For me, may sound kind of odd to you, but the moment came in March of last year when Donald Trump came to do to Municipal Auditorium, and some of my students were planning on going, and they were so reluctant to say anything about planning to go or about printing off their ticket that I really felt like that I wanted them to know that, I appreciated the fact that they were willing to go and just listen to what was said or to participate in that. And I felt like, we really needed to do a really good job, a better job of making sure that that they felt supported, not necessarily in a certain political view, but in that whole engagement that we should have as citizens being engaged in our democracy.
And we should note to viewers that you are not just the sponsor of the Democratic Club in the school, but the Republican Club too.
That's right. Yeah. I like to tell people I'm the proudest Democrat to sponsor the high school Republicans. So, and people that surprises people. But when you really think about what we need as a country and what we hope our students learn, it's once again to be participating in our political process, to become more knowledgeable, to hear different viewpoints. And, we have serious concerns as citizens and as members of our community and our state and our nation and our world. And we need to go forward on those. And so if we're not communicating with each other, it's very difficult to do that.
So could you tell me a little bit about how you saw, was there any change that you saw in the students from the start of last school year to the end of last school year in the way that they were treating each other or speaking to each other?
Well, yes. I think I have a really great example of that. The March for Our Lives is a really great example for that, where as a kind of bipartisan group, my kids, my high school Republicans and Democrats come together and they say, you know what, we think everyone should be participating in our political process. So they're very passionate about voting. I'm very passionate about voting. And because of the friendships that they've developed, many of my high school Republicans actually came to, encourage all the students who are marching in March for Our Lives. And so you may have been surprised to see, but that actually a number of my high school Republicans actually participated in there. So we have a much higher percentage. So at Hume-Fogg, there is it's about 85% Democrat and about 10 to 15% Republican as far as leaning. And a much higher percentage of my high school Republicans participate in those conversations. And I think that really says a lot, that they really enjoy having a space where they feel like that they can share their ideas and their thoughts, and that they really appreciate the fact that people are reading, their perspective on ideas.
Now, when we get to the issue of young people especially, this can be a challenge. We adults don't always treat each other the way we should, perhaps. And so
That's
what I
right.
saw last Wednesday at Hume-Fogg, thank you for the invitation again, was students who were talking passionately at times about different issues, but they weren't beating each other up. And tell us a little bit about the ground rules, because you made an announcement of there were some ground rules. This wasn't just go at it.
Right. Yeah. So I think ground rules are really important because I don't think we should assume that people have had modeled civil conversation, or really what that looks like. And so we do have ground rules about that we are there to talk about ideas and issues. And so how you do that is when someone says something that you don't agree with or you don't like, that you explore that. So I think a lot of our problems that we've had is that everything is a debate. But when you come together to read different sources, and you frame it as, we're here to learn more. We're here to refine our own thinking, to strengthen our arguments, because ultimately, when you are faced with an argument that is opposite of what you think, that actually gives you the opportunity to refine your thinking, but then also to improve and strengthen your argument. And it's our hope that our kids go away with strengthened arguments. So if you've gone through 4 years of education and you've never had your ideas challenged, then I don't think that's the purpose of education. Education should. So we do have ground rules because we don't assume that kids know or have seen what a civil conversation looks like. And then the part of that comes afterwards is we hope that kids act on it, whatever their beliefs are. And one of the things that we really have kind of embedded in our Project Civ discussions, and then what's come out of that, is that whatever your beliefs, strengthen your ideas. You've had the opportunity to talk about it, but then go out and advocate for those beliefs. And that, and the First Amendment really shows us the way that we can advocate. And that's just been such a gift that our founders left to us.
Sure, and we have here in the newsroom, we have a wall that has the First Amendment that is painted on it, and you tested the students of their knowledge of the First Amendment, and they got it right.
Yeah, that's right. Speech, I have 14-year-olds who know the 5 freedoms that are guaranteed by the First Amendment. But I would encourage our viewers to see, do you guys know what are the 5 freedoms that are guaranteed by the First Amendment?
Sure. We welcome you to put those in the comments if you wish, and then we'll come back afterwards.
Yeah.
So let's talk about one of those freedoms, which is the freedom to petition government.
That's right.
And there was a specific case study last Wednesday where you had students petition. Tell us.
That's right. Yeah. So after our discussion, and this discussion was actually on the role of civility. So it sounds like an easy thing to discuss, but people define civility in different ways. And then, is civility just a tool of those who are in control to oppress those who aren't that are in control? So this is, there's a lot to debate here. But then afterwards, kids had the opportunity to petition the government on their behalf for what they believe should be a change or should be a continued practice. So they wrote letters to Congressman Jim Cooper, and then we delivered those letters. So that was them really stepping their toe into an advocacy. And they can't vote yet. So what can you do if you can't vote yet? So this is something that they can do. And the fact of the matter is that there's lots of things we can do. And I can't stress that enough. I think we tend to get so easily full of despair. But when I look at these young people and I look at the conversations that they can have at 14 and 15 years old, I'm full of hope. But you have to really connect the dots. And I don't think that we do a good enough job as a nation of really connecting the dots for people to help them understand what are the ways that you can advocate? What are the freedoms that the Constitution's given us? And how do we use those? And when we do use those, we're showing our love for our nation and just really explaining that and making that so explicit.
So the articles, and I read those articles before I went too, because you assigned the homework, so
That's
I was going
right.
to do that. And what's really interesting about it was it goes to that point of definitions,
Right.
because in some cases, some people who feel civility is not appropriate for this era. That is,
That's right.
that they're tired of being nice. Maxine Waters herself said,
Right.
the congresswoman from California said,
Right.
if you see a pro-Trump person, don't let him into your restaurant
That's
or
right.
wherever. She was chastised by
Right.
Speaker Pelosi.
Yeah.
So when you have those kinds of arguments, and these are our leaders, these are our
Yeah.
top leaders, whether it's President Trump or
Right.
whether it's Maxine Waters,
Right.
how do you help set the example for students when their examples may not show what civility should be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have conversation starters. So if a lot of them do not know or realize, like, how do you counter speech that you don't like? When someone says something that you don't like, how can you counter that? But a lot of that is, first of all, I try to model myself. So my student, if you ask me, students know my partisan leanings. But I read really widely. And so I will comment on things that I've read. So I read really widely, and I think that that's a really good example. But then also these conversation starters really help, and by teaching them that the purpose of this is not to win a debate, but the purpose is to learn and to strengthen your argument where you can hopefully persuade people over to whatever it is you think about this topic. And I think tying that in with the whole advocacy, that you have these rights, that they were granted by the documents that founded our nation, and that then go out and act on that. And so you could feasibly have, one thing we're going to have this year is action lunches, where we are involved in advocacy, and people could be advocating for all sorts of different things. So you could have someone writing Congressman Cooper about, one side of the immigration debate, and you could have someone else sitting next to them on the other side, but they're both using the rights and freedoms that are granted by our Constitution, that's what binds us together.
That's excellent. And one thing I also emphasize both to you, to your students, and also to the viewing public is that we definitely want to have your letters.
Absolutely.
Letters at Tennessean.com.
Yeah.
To express your voice. That's another way to basically show your citizenship is
Right.
to be part of that public debate. Because I get a lot of criticism at times when it comes to what kind of views, what kind of platform should we be?
Right.
Why are we favoring this view over another view?
Right.
And we really do try to represent or publish those letters that are sent to us.
Right.
And we encourage more letters. Oftentimes, sometimes the provocative letters get more responses than others.
Yeah.
But the idea is to have a very honest conversation about the issues of the
Right.
day.
And that can be really empowering to students. So one of my conservative students, Rachel, she wrote a letter to the editor, which you publish as a featured letter. And that has really been very powerful for her. It's helped her feel like she has a voice. She's found something that she's interested in doing. I'm not sure she knew before that she had such a strong voice. And so it's empowered her to go on. So she ended up writing a blog post about it. She's become being very involved. She's become much more knowledgeable about the topic. She wrote a pro-Second Amendment, but then also in this sort of light of civility and let's keep this conversation going. And so that's been really powerful to her. So I think also we think about who's being empowered. And I think we need to teach all our citizens that they are empowered by these rights and these freedoms. And, I think there's a lot of, a lot of complaints, people complain a lot, but I want to see more action. I want to see it out of my students. I want to see it out of everyone, out of all of us as citizens. So have hope, be hopeful. And being hopeful isn't that you don't see that there are problems, because we do have them. But being hopeful means that you are acting to change that. And then part of that, acting to change, is really being familiar with different viewpoints. And I feel like that's really added to my own life, ever since the 2016 election. I've really made a concerted effort to read a lot of conservative publications. So I read the National Review, I read the Weekly Standard, I read the Washington Examiner, and I may not agree, or do I agree with the things that are in it, or some of the things that are in it, but you see nuggets there that you can build off of. So you talk about something, many of my students are really involved in gun violence and school shootings, and they've done some amazing things. But when you read conservative writer David French, who's definitely a pro 2A supporter, and he writes about gun violence restraining orders, and you read that and you think, you know what? I agree with that too. Maybe we could start there. Maybe that's something that we could pass. And so it gives you a stepping stone.
So let's go to some of the comments that we have here. We have a lot of thumbs up from Adnan Ahmedi, Don Burks, Brenda Dickinson. Matthew Sullivan says, Ms. Smithfield is incredible. Thank you for your efforts in this critical area. Amy Griffith Graydon has also given a thumbs up. Marcel Hernandez, our mutual friend. Thank you, Amanda Williams Smithfield, for all the work you do. And he was there at the second hour of the civility conversation. Misty Beam Jenkins, Amanda, this is such great work. And Maria Martinez has a big yes. So part of the reason why I wanted to read from here is because an added dimension that I didn't have when I was in school was social media.
Right.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role of people's behavior on social media and also the prospect of bullying, which has become a very serious issue, especially in school. How do you work through that in the context of civility? Yeah.
Well, so one thing is by providing this physical space for kids to come together and have these difficult conversations. I'm pretty explicit about that. That's really your best opportunity. But then I think a lot of it is just teaching kids about how everything works together. So what gets thumbs up? What gets the most, the most comments, and being really thoughtful. So one of the people who came to talk to us was Senator Dickerson. And I think if you look at Senator Dickerson's, how he uses social media, he uses it in a very positive way. And he told my kids, before I post something, I think again, then I think again. And so you'll notice the way he uses it is he only uses it to promote, to pass on information. Here's what the bills I'm working on, but then also as a positive. Hey, today I'm going to Thelma Harper's, Easter egg hunt, and I'm so excited to support my colleague. Or, hey, this unemployment rate's low this month. And so he uses it in a very positive way. So I felt he's a very good model. So part of that too is that the guests I invite in, really looking at how they use social media, they use it in very positive ways. And so I think that's a really good example for kids. And so they don't have necessarily the best examples, whether it's us, I'm talking about myself here, that I think a lot of us have used it in ways and kind of regretted it later. But I think if we can just really show them consequences of it, being thoughtful, being careful about how they use it, and that ultimately conversations we have in person have the most impact.
Well, last night our mutual friend Jim Brown sent us an article from the New York Times about the sparring that's going on with President Trump and the publisher of the New York Times related to how he characterizes the media, whether it's enemy of the people or other comments. And I'm wondering, in terms of let's look at the media for a moment. What do we need to do better as media organizations? I know we're not one monolithic organization, but from your vantage point as a librarian, as an informed citizen, and as someone who reads tremendously, what should we be doing better?
That's a great question. So I think our 24-hour news cycle really encourages and the model for newspapers making money. I think it encourages kind of the things that are on the extremes, because those are the things that get a lot of comments, and those are the articles that get a lot of hits. And so I think looking at that model, but I think that a lot of kids don't really know what's involved in creating the news, what sort of financial decisions that you guys have to make. And I'm going to give an example of this. So one of the discussions, so I had a fake news panel, and it involved, I had Dave Paulson there, and so it was really great. And we also, and so there was this was at Phil Williams, so we also had this really great Keel Hunt. We had this great discussion about that. And so I was very explicit about inviting my conservative students to come, because I know that this is something that they really feel. And so one of the discussions was about, like the presidential, when you have a debate about like sharing what sort of questions that you have. And so like realizing that that's something that, an organization might want to get like a question from the opposition in order to ask, then that kind of made sense. So I think there's a lack of transparency or a lack of knowledge on the side of, the citizens of us, where we don't know what are all the decisions that are going into you deciding how to present, an argument. What are all those decisions that go in front? I think some of the things like clearly labeling things as opinion really helps, that this is an opinion article. I really like a lot of the things that you guys are doing where you do the kind of pro-con and you're putting that in the opinion page on both sides. I think that can be really effective. And so I think that there's a lack of just understanding of all the things that go about in making the news, and then how do you all decide when you have something goes out? What makes you decide to publish something right then instead of waiting to the next day?
Sure. So we don't have any takers right now in terms of what the 5 freedoms are. So let's tell them. Let's tell them the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment.
5 freedoms. So you have freedom of religion, you have freedom of the press, you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of assembly, and freedom to petition. So, those 5 freedoms, those are the First Amendment. That's the first thing that our founders gave us after the Constitution came out.
Now, we're coming to the end of our conversation, but is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to discuss?
Well, we've talked a little bit about, I'd like to talk to people about what are some things that, I think people are like, okay, Amanda, well, you're a teacher, and so you have this unique opportunity. But I really want to encourage all the viewers, whether you're a teacher or a librarian or not, to really take about some changes in their own life that can help them to really be on this path. And so the first thing is that 56% of Republicans and 64% of Democrats have few or no friends of the opposite political party. And I think when we have one of the reasons we have these broad swaths and what we see is like comments being made like all Republicans are racist is because if you literally do not know anyone or you never have a conversation with someone who identifies as of that other political party, then it is very easy to stereotype like that where we have these broad swaths. So there's lots of organizations that can help you with that. So I know you've talked about Better Angels, which pairs up, 8 red Republicans and 8 blues, and we have those that go on here. We have an organization here in Nashville called Common Ground. They have a meeting on Thursday night, and we'll make sure we put that in the comments. And so we get together and we talk about an issue. So very similar. It's like Project Civ for adults. There's also ones, if you're here, like I don't have any friends of the opposite political party, but I would really be interested in talking, and I don't know how to get that started. There are organizations like the American Dialogues Project, which are so cool because what they do is they pair you with someone and you have a moderated 40-minute conversation with someone. And so you start that. So, and just like reading more broadly. So consider reading The Nation or more Huffington Post articles if you are on the conservative side. If you're on the liberal side, one of my favorite conservative writers is David French. I also follow like Jonah Goldberg, Shoshana Wiseman. But if there's anything I want to leave people with, it's that when I talk to my kids, when I'm with them, I'm filled with so much hope. We should be hopeful. Mm-hmm. We should be hopeful that these young people have the ability, if 14 and 15-year-olds have the ability to come together and have these discussions, then we should be having these discussions. We should be having them in our households. Parents, challenge your kids. Why would someone think the opposite of what you have? So we can embed this in our own lives. Whatever we think for certain, read something from the opposing viewpoint. See how you could counter that argument and go from there. And just really, share that curiosity to how someone can think differently than you. Start from there. Start with those assumptions that people have, that people are coming from a point of true conviction rather than like an evil idea. So.
We want to thank Amanda Smithfield. Before we conclude, this is going to be on the Civility Tennessee. This is on the Civility Tennessee Facebook page. If you're not a member, please join. Just go to Facebook and type in Civility Tennessee. You can also go to our landing page, civility.tennessean.com. Remember, you can send letters to the editor at letters@tennessean.com. And we have an event coming up, actually August 27th, Monday, from 6 to 8 p.m. at Lipscomb University. We are hosting a panel discussion called Why Tennesseans Aren't Voting Like They Should. And it's got some of the people that you mentioned,
right.
Congressman Jim Cooper, Senator Steve Dickerson, Trey Hargett, who's the Secretary of State, and Shanna Singh-Huey, who is the president of Think Tennessee, a public policy think tank. And I'll be moderating along with Michelle Steele from Lipscomb University's Nelson and Sue Andrews Center for Civic Leadership. We want to thank Amanda Smithfield for being our guest on the Civility Tennessee discussion.
Me.
And thank you all to our viewers. Have a wonderful day.